Congresswoman is just taking care of something downstairs. She'll be up in a moment. We're going to just say Birkat Hamazon now, since most people have finished their meal already. If you're still eating or schmoozing, no worries, but we'll do it for those who are ready for that. Shir Hamalo Beshuv Adonai et Shivat Zion Hayinu Kechol Az Yimalech Shonenu Rina Az Yomru Vagoyim Itil Adonai Lasoti Meila Lasoti Manu Hayinu Semechim Shuv Adonai Ashvitenu Kafikim Negav Hazorim Bedima Berina Yiktoru Haloch Yelechu Vacho Nosem Eshech Hazorah Yavo Verina No say alumotav chaverai nevarach Yehi Shem Adonai mevarach me'atav yad olam b'rshut chaverai nevarach Aleinu shachanu mishalo Baruch Aleinu shachanu mishalo v'tuvo chayinu Baruch v'baruch shemo Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Hazan et ha'olam kulo b'tuvo b'chein mechesed u'vrachamim U'noten lechem lechol basar ki le'olam chasto U'b'tuvo agadol Tamid lo chasar lanu ve'al yichsar lanu Ma'azon le'olam va'ed ba'avor shemo agadol Yozan imparnes l'akol U'meitiv l'akol U'mechim azon lechol briotav Asher bara Baruch atah Adonai Hazan et hakol Yirat Adonai Kedoshav Ki Ein Machzor L'Reyav Kifir Mashu V'Raivu V'Dorshei Adonai L'Ksur Katov Hodil Adonai Ki Tov Ki Le'olam Chasto Poteach Et Yadecha U'Maspi Alecho Chai Ratzon Baruch HaGever Asher Tok Adonai V'Haya Adonai Mivtacho Na'ra'iti Gam Zakanti Ve'lo Ra'iti Tzadik Neza V'Zaru Mavakesh Lachem ezaru mevakesh, lachem Adonai oz le'amo yiten, Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom. With hearts full of gratitude, we welcome back into our community our Congressperson Representative Sydney Kamlager-Dove. Thank you so much for being here.
Very excited.
Oh, love your mother. My mother's very excited too.
Okay, good. So I don't know, my mother texts me from whenever she sees Rabbi Sharon Brous on television, she'll text me and she'll say, do you know this woman? You need to meet this woman. She's the most brilliant. And I say, I do know her. She never believes me.
We're going to get our moms together.
We should.
We'll do a mother-daughter spa day.
Yeah, okay. Yes.
She's right there. That's Marsha Brous. Hi, folks. If you haven't met my mom,
yes.
You may be a congressperson, but she's the mayor of IKAR. So
there we go.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that you're here because you all know and love our Congressperson, Representative Sidney Kamlager-Dove, but I'm going to just say a couple of words of official bio and background here. You are and have been for your entire career a fierce advocate for justice and for families. You proudly represent our vibrant, diverse 37th Congressional District here in Los Angeles County. Representative Kamlager-Dove is a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, where she serves as the ranking member of the Subcommittee on South and Central Asia and the House Committee on the Judiciary. She's the whip of the Congressional Black Caucus. She is the co-chair of the Congressional Brazil Caucus and the policy co-chair of the Democratic Women's Caucus. She has a long list of accomplishments and achievements, but I will say that all of your work, the consistent thread through all of it, is your core values and your core priorities. This is about environmental and climate justice. This is about economic justice. This is about protecting and preserving democracy and civil society. And this is about art and the flourishing of the soul and spirit. And we just feel so very proud to call you a congressperson. And I wanted to say one word that you won't find in the official bio, which you know that I'm so touched by this, but I don't know if our whole community is aware. In the very dark days, in the immediate aftermath of October 7th, when we were in deep anguish and grief as individuals, as a community, as a collective, and when many of us felt that many of our friends could not find the words, could not pick up the phone and call and check in and see if, for example, my brother and his family were alive, Representative Sidney Kamlager-Dove called me 4 times in 1 week to check on me and to check on you, to see how we were holding our grief and what you could do as a friend and as an ally. And I will never forget that for the rest of my life. And it was a powerful and critical counter testimony, a counter narrative, which I think I spoke about it the first Shabbos afterwards, which is like, we want to paint a story right now in which we've been abandoned and betrayed by the world, but it's just not true, because there's Representative Sidney Kamlager-Dove. She's right here. And she's our friend, and she actually cares and holds this very complex, very painful story in a way that truly shows that at the depths of your heart is a real love of humanity and a deep care for and concern for our Jewish people and for Israelis and also for Palestinians and all the people of Gaza. And we share that deep concern. And I'm so honored to be represented by you and to be your friend. Thank you. So thank you. We're really grateful to have you here.
I'm verklempt.
Well done. Okay. So how are things going in Washington?
I'm verklempt. Well, we came home a day early because they could not get their stuff together to vote to kill people. So all of the messaging and storytelling and truth-telling is actually working as it relates to billions and hundreds of billions of dollars in cuts to Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security. So I think it's going well because they're running scared and trying to figure out, they're testing new lies, to figure out what's going to sell. But it's crazy times. It's crazy times in Washington, D.C. Oddly enough, the weather is better.
It's really the upside down world.
It's the upside down world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so we can start there with, with the proposed cuts to SNAP and Medicare and Social Security and Section 8 housing vouchers, which are going to cause so much damage. And I think you're right to frame this as a matter of life or death. People will die. People are dying already as a result of some of the policy priorities of this administration, a lot of which has been done without congressional, without legislation, but it's been done by executive order. So, let's start really locally. What will these cuts how will these cuts impact the people living in Los Angeles and also across the state and across the district? Can you talk a little bit about what could be done here locally to counteract the effect of these very draconian proposals?
Yeah. So first of all, it's always good to come back to IKAR. You bring life into my heart. It is always good to be sharing space with Rabbi Sharon Brous. You make me feel safe. It's so great to see familiar faces in the audience, folks who text me, call me all the time, and help shine light on the right path.
That's primarily Janet.
Yes.
And everyone else.
Yes. And the rabbi is rocking some really great nail color. So we're going to start with that. So a couple months ago, Republicans passed a $4.5 trillion tax cut to give tax breaks to the wealthiest of the wealthy, and they are trying to make it permanent. Yes, Make America Poor Again is really the true story of this administration. And so now they have to find ways to pay for it. And so they have been selling this narrative that Social Security is a scheme, a Ponzi scheme. There are dead people on Medicaid and Medicare. People don't need health care. And so they are doing this to justify cutting Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security, and Medicaid to the tune of $900 billion nationally. So there have been polls, 76% of Americans support Medicaid and don't want any cuts. The three highest polling programs are actually Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security. It's like 85%, 82%, 81%. When they have also done polls about, like, should this be cut? In every single congressional district across the country, over 75% of people in each congressional district say, do not cut Medicaid. So we know it is incredibly popular. You have seen the stories of Republicans not wanting to hold town halls or only wanting certain people to go to the town halls because they don't want the message of how Medicaid saves lives to be told. My district has the third highest number of Medicaid enrollees in the country. Right here in glossy, flossy Los Angeles. In California, 7 of the 10 highest Medicaid enrollee districts are in our state, in the country. So this is real. If these cuts were to take place, 470,000 people in my district would lose Medicaid. There are 700,000 people in the district. So over half, well over half, this is real stuff. And we know that the people who are on Medicaid are elders, they're children, they're poor, they're folks living with disabilities. We also know that we all benefit from Medicaid regardless of if we are on it. Because if you are going to an urgent care, if you're going to see a doctor, if you step into a hospital, if you're going to a community clinic, they are also taking care of people who are on Medicaid. They are getting reimbursed because they are taking care of those folks. So they're able to stay open and provide care for you, the non-Medicaid person, because the Medicaid reimbursement is allowing them to stay open. So I'm trying to break it down because I want people to remember, and not just on Saturdays or Sundays, that we are all connected and that we are dependent upon one another for our safety and our security. Yes? So go back to your readings to connect to that truth, to give you the courage to fight for what's real. And if we do these cuts, we will still pay. We will pay in other ways because people will die. The sick will get sicker, and they will still end up in the hospitals and in urgent care, and it will be costing all of us more money.
That's right. It's almost like people are living in this fantasy right now where they're not connecting the dots between what's happening and all of the bluster and these broad strokes movements and the actual human beings who are going to be and are already being impacted. And a couple weeks ago, we had one of your colleagues, Congressperson Laura Friedman, was here speaking. And afterwards, one of our beloved community members who's in this room said, I'm about to start chemotherapy, and if these cuts go through, I will be the face of what breaks personally, because it's me. It's happening to me.
Yes.
And I think there's something so profound and important about us recognizing how high the stakes really are right now. There's also a kind of mechanism of self-protection that is escapism that we are in grave danger of right now because it's so much so fast and the fire hose and, like hard to figure out where to even prioritize what we can do to try to stop this onslaught of really attempts to take away rights and dignities and life-saving programs. And so how do we prevent people from falling into escapism, keep people awake to and aware of the dangers of what's actually going on, including the life and death threats that we're facing, and not catastrophize because we know that only silences dissent. I mean, catastrophizing is capitulation in a way. It's like a spiritual capitulation because we realize like it's as bad as it could ever be, so there's nothing I can do about it. So how do we actually like take the pieces of the elements that are under attack right now and figure out what kind of barricades we can build to protect ourselves and each other when so much is under attack at once?
So I've been thinking a lot about that question because it's been posed in so many different ways, and I reflect on where we live in Tinseltown, Hollywood, and there's so many movies about good people fighting villains who seem to be impenetrable, right? They have all the devices, they have access to all the data, they have the strongest people, but there's still vulnerabilities. And it's always a story about the little person, the little group, right, of rebels that finds a way to identify the vulnerabilities, and they prevent themselves from infighting so much that they lose, and they fight and defeat the big bad monster. And that's what we're living in right now. We don't have control of the Supreme Court. We don't have control of the Senate or the House. We don't have control of the White House. And that would make you want to step out of reality. Yeah. But you have to think about being that small group of rebels and identifying the vulnerabilities and leaning into it and preventing yourself from wanting to do what they want us to do, which is continued infighting. There have been over 210 lawsuits that have been filed. We have prevailed in over half of them, lower courts and higher courts. They don't tell you this because they don't want you to know the truth, but when the courts have said to them, stop doing stuff, they have stopped. They tell a different narrative, but they had a bus full of folks that they were getting ready to deport, and the judge picked up the phone and said, don't you do it. And they turned that bus around. Because they control the bully pulpit, that was not a story that they wanted to get out. So we have to continue to do what we know to be right, and we have to fight. And we also have to fight by telling the truth. Stories are powerful because they are emotional and they connect us. And this is an administration that wants to make this whole thing called government a reality TV show. That's why Kristi Noem is going to create Cops 2.0 by having immigrants, I don't know, get on a TV show to fight for status. They like ratings.
Did you see in the paper this morning, they're actually, it seems like there's being greenlit right now, a reality TV show for undocumented people to fight on TV, and at the end, the one who wins will get citizenship. Those who lose,
Exactly.
I mean, this is in the New York Times.
Yes.
Today.
Yes. First, it was in the Daily Beast, and we all said, is this true? And then when it came out in the Times, I was like, well, I don't know if I trust them anymore, but I guess it is true.
Because the paper reads like The Onion now. I mean, every day, the paper reads like who can think of this?
You cannot. But the goal is to turn this all into a reality TV show.
Yes.
And that will pacify you. I mean, you know how you zonk out when you're watching crazy reality TV, and we have to push against that. The fact that, like I said, the fact that they've had such a hard time dealing with the truth in these committees. I've been in these committees. We've been talking about folks who will be cut. We've been talking from Medicaid. We've been talking about Americans being deported. They've been silent. They call us liars. They leave their seats. They don't want to be on camera. That's because they know that what we're saying is striking a chord with the American people. So we have to continue to do that. It may feel like it's not a win because we're used to someone like laying out, tapping out, saying, I lost, and they're not going to do that. But when they hear their constituents complaining, when they see the polls, when they see us talking about what is unconstitutional, when they see that resonating with folks, they start to make changes and they start to pivot. And we have to claim those pivots as wins and then keep leaning in. We also have to remind ourselves that this is a protracted battle. I liken it to playing football. We are in the beginning of the first quarter. We have not even hit halftime. We don't even know if there's going to be a halftime show, but we have a lot more to go before the end. And so we have to make sure that we are, drinking our Gatorade, that we are taking our rests, that we are tapping out and letting others come in, that we are prepared, because this is going to be a long battle.
Yeah, that's so smart. And I remember in the first administration, there was something going around that people credited to Michael Moore, but I don't know if he actually wrote it. But he said, we have to remember 8th grade choir, when you need to hold a note for longer than any person could possibly hold a note. And so they would start with you start the sound, and just when you're about to run out of breath, Ivy picks up, and then Kellen picks up, and then Ashley picks up, and then Irv has breath again, and so he can jump back in.
Yes, Irv!
And so I think we have to remember that we don't all have to be in all the time, because we need to actually sustain ourselves for the long haul. I want to come back to the deportations, certainly, but I do want to ask you, because we had this incredibly powerful and meaningful lunch and learn last Shabbat with members of our community who are of trans experience. There was a parent of a trans child, 2 trans adults, and then one of the doctors who's one of the lead figures in helping with gender-affirming care. And this is a community, we have obviously many people in the IKAR community who are of trans experience, and something that we're deeply concerned about right now is the way that the very issue of trans humans, trans people, became the centerpiece of a really, really awful campaign. And it seems like it's a winning issue. Like, people need to, build this kind of oppositional, she's for they, them, he's for us. And so I want to.
He's really just for him. So.
Well, right. You think what's tipping you off to that? Is it the flying palace? I don't know. Again,
so many
it's like
things.
An onion. It's
I know, so many things.
My question is, what can we do to protect our LGBTQ community? And what can and is Congress doing? And by that I mean you and your wonderful colleagues, to really state that. I mean, these are some of the folks who are really on the front lines of a truly nefarious force. And I want to think clearly and honestly about what we can do to help not only be allies, but really to be fully stand in solidarity with our people who need it most right now.
I think the first thing we have to do is center our own selves in love and humanity. And we may be in various places on the spectrum of love and understanding, but I think it is really important that we connect with folks from the trans community, from the general LGBTQ community, and hug and love and kiss and embrace and say, I am with you. Even if you don't understand every component of it. Sometimes we all just need a moment where someone touches us and says, I love you. So just do that, because you don't know how people are feeling. And we know that attempted suicide rates and suicide rates are incredibly high in the trans community. And we know that when there is at least one accepting parent or person in their life, the suicide attempts decrease dramatically. So your touch, your love, your smile could literally save someone's life. That's what we can do at a local level, an individual level. It's also important to be an ally. Just stand up against bullying and intimidation. You know what that feels like. We've all been bullied in the past because we are an other of some sort. And so be that ally. It doesn't mean you put on some gloves and start knocking somebody out, but just stand in the gap and say stop when folks are being bullied. They can be bullied by a friend or neighbor. They can be bullied by an ordinance or a law. They can be bullied by a very nasty narrative. I'm a proud member of the Congressional Equality Caucus. what we have been doing is fighting back in these hearings. And it's been bare knuckles. I mean, we've been calling people out. We've been using bad language. We've been calling out the duplicity and the hypocrisy. It's gotten kind of nasty. But we're recognizing that we're dealing with people who have no moral compass right now and have decided that a winning strategy is to demonize and dehumanize trans community members and folks from the LGBTQ community. So we are fighting fire with fire. It is very hard for us to pass any kind of legislation, but we can shame, and we do. We shame them. And I will tell you that I know Republican members of Congress who have trans and who have LGBTQ family members. And they are voting against them. And so one of the added things I do is actually call them on that, and say, there's no amount of plane tickets or Gucci bags or cars that you can purchase that will wipe away the fact that you're voting against a loved one's right to exist. So we're doing it in a lot of ways. We have to collectively help people understand that we're also talking about a very small segment of the U.S. population, okay? And so what's the big win here? To scare people back into the shadows? When the real fight ahead is making sure that people have access to Social Security and healthcare, making sure that people have access to housing, making sure that folks who are rightfully deserve to be here are not being wrongfully deported, making sure that the U.S. government is following the Constitution, which includes the president. So it's also about pivoting to say, I'm standing up for my friends, I'm being an ally, and I'm making sure we're not distracted by this issue. Because I'm sorry, I don't want to offend, but that is not, the LGBTQ community is not the most pressing thing that we should be focusing on right now. So leave them alone, and talk about the things that are really, really going to be hurting, every single one of us in real ways. Because then it also takes the culture and the judgment and the ignorance and the social issues. It deflates all of those things. And we know those can tend to get more emotional than we need them to be.
It reminds me of, there was a little bit on The Daily Show last month that said you can tell how bad the stock market is doing by watching right-wing news media and seeing how obscure the trans issue is that they're talking about.
Yes.
Because they'll find like these crazy stories that it's like,
what?
And not even in this country, but in another country where there was some athlete, and so because it's all a distraction from what's actually going on.
So I will add to that. I sit on the Foreign Affairs Committee, and we have very strange hearings, and we were talking about USAID being defunded, and of course, poor malnourished babies are going to die because USAID is, anyway, I could get into all those horror stories. And in every committee hearing, Republicans bring up the fact that USAID paid for some drag queen show. Like in every hearing. And I think it was like to the tune of $20,000. And I'm like, okay, which one of you is low-key drag and you just are using this to like pivot from something you got going on in your life? I just don't understand. And then I do tell them it was the RNC that actually crashed. Republicans crashed Grindr during the RNC. So stop talking about this drag show when you're talking about USAID and malaria pills and clean water and helping, refugee camps have the money that they need to operate. Like, why are we talking about a drag show?
Yes, yeah. Well, I will just, thank you. I know.
It's crazy.
I sometimes just want to thank you and apologize to you all the time. Like, you're really out there. You're in the rooms. You're in the room where it's happening, and it's a hard room to be in.
It's a hard room.
I do want to share in the just in the spirit of lifting up a really beautiful person in our community who died last week, Abner Goldstein, and his Shiva on Tuesday night. I don't know if anyone here was in the room. But we were sharing beautiful stories. He died at 95, and he died very peacefully, and he was a truly wonderful human. And people were sharing stories about how Abner cared for their heart. And one person said that that this person had their oldest daughter. They all went into COVID, and they were in their homes for a year and a half, and then they came back out of COVID, and Abner saw the mother and said, how's your kiddo? And the mother said, I took a deep breath and said, he's doing well, thank you. And Abner said, oh. And the mother said, my kid transitioned during COVID. And Abner said, well, bring that young man to me. I'd like to know him. And she, it was, do you understand the story? He was at the time 90 years old. And he said, bring that young man to me. I want to get to know him. And I feel like what you're saying is exactly right. I mean, this is about recapturing our own humanity and each other's. And I think this is the across the board story, from cuts to healthcare, from cuts to Social Security, from attacks on the trans community. This feels so utterly essential for us to just expand our hearts and be able to see one another as Abner did. So
blessings to his life.
I know. And his son, Ethan Goldstein, was, of course, one of our beloved board members and a board chair at IKAR. And so it was really wonderful. You know, when you leave a really great funeral in Shiva and you feel like you're the one who's enriched because, okay.
Yes.
Let's talk about the deportations for a couple of minutes. I'm sorry for that transition, but I'll work on my transitions for your next visit. Sorry. My mom really loves you, by the way. I don't know if you know. Okay, so we were just talking at lunch about during the week I was reading about the young girl who was the first U.S. citizen to be deported back in March. Actually, it's 2 weeks after the inauguration, in February. She was the cancer patient. She just turned 11 this week, and she was in the car with her parents, who are both undocumented, and their 5 siblings. 4 of them are actually U.S. citizens. And they were driving to a medical specialist because she's in cancer treatment for a very rare form of cancer. And they were on the road, and they got pulled over, and they had all the documentation from the doctors and the lawyers saying that this is essential life care. And they got pulled into a detention center where they were forced to stay with 5 kids and 2 parents for 24 hours, and then literally dropped on the other side of a bridge in Mexico. And they're still there, and they don't have the care that she needs in Mexico. And so this was the first. I mean, since then, there have been several others, as we know. You have some experience getting people back into the country. And I know you were able to secure the release of one of your constituents who was detained in Venezuela for 2 years, obviously before this administration. But can you help us understand? It feels like there's a black box. Like once people are, sort of taken out of here, they say that the prison in El Salvador, where Abrego Garcia is like you only come out in a coffin. I mean, can you, I know it's possible to get people out of impossible situations because you've done it. What is your take on what could be done right now, both to mitigate against future unlawful detentions and deportations, and also to try to get our folks back who have been swept out of the country unjustly and illegally?
Okay, big question. So the thing that I had going for me when Avon Hernandez was able to be released is we had an administration that we could work with who was following the law and actually understood what it meant to abide by the Constitution. So now, instead of that, we have to use the power of the courts. You lean into Thomas Paine saying law is king, and also community. There's been a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 7-year-old, and an 11-year-old U.S. citizens deported. We talked about needing cancer treatment. And of course, this administration also has cut funding research for cancer, and we are actually on the cusp of coming up with a cure for breast cancer in clinical trials right now, happening right here in your county, and that funding has been cut. Okay, so let's just talk about that. So there have been a lot of folks who have been detained. It makes me think of what happened to Khashoggi. And I'm like, are we turning into that kind of country where we're letting our folks, or we're actually sending our folks into these situations where we don't know if they're going to come back? The prison, I love Irving's, his look. He's like, this is crazy. Yes, it is. And some of these prisons are the worst of the worst. And in fact, in Kilmar Abrego Garcia's case, he's being put he's in a prison with MS-13 ultra baddies, and we are afraid that he won't come out. But people have been released. A young brother, Motion, from Vermont was released. You know, we don't like to tell these stories. Like I said, there was a busload of folks that were headed to the plane to be deported to Venezuela unlawfully. That bus turned around. Mm-hmm. But we have to keep reminding people that they're actually interested in deporting and detaining U.S. citizens. They do not care about your status. The situation that happened in New Jersey is very scary. It was premeditated, I think, to bring the mayor and these Congress members across the fence at a detention center to then detain them. They can't be deported, but they're looking at being charged for actually doing their duty, which is to check on these facilities. We have a detention center here in Los Angeles County that has over 100 unaccompanied minors in a facility. They had no access to legal representation. We don't know how they were being treated. My office caused a stink, and then all of a sudden, they started to get representation, and they said, okay, no, we're doing this. So it does actually take all of us calling and saying, I'm going to call you on this, and I'm going to have a press conference, and I'm going to show pictures of babies in cages because we know that does not sell with the American people, and I'm going to shame you into doing the right thing. We have to do that, and we have to continue to push the courts. And the courts do not want to give up their own authority. That's the real thing, and maybe one of the only things we have going for us. No judge wants to say, I'm going to yield my power to you. Mm-hmm. The Republicans in Congress are doing that, but judges and the judicial branch doesn't want to. And so how are we threading the needle around what is lawful is what we have to do. But in my office, in fact, we did the reverse. There was a couple from Guatemala, and the child was stuck in Guatemala, and they would not let the child come here with its mother. The child needed cancer treatment. And we actually fought to get an expedited visa so that they could get on a plane during Thanksgiving and come here and get treatment so the baby wouldn't die. So that's actually what we should be doing, rather than making deals with other countries to deport our people over there, because that's an act of silence. You see, these are acts, these are silencing and intimidation acts, and we have to find courage in them and stand up.
Yes, thank you. We're going to come to questions in a little bit. I have a little bit more that I want to ask you about before we do. So, you sit on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. I started by talking about how grateful I was personally for your incredible support of me and of our community in the immediate aftermath of October 7th. And obviously, this war, it's inconceivable to me that this war is still going on after almost 2 years, this horrific devastation, that there are still as far as we know, 23 living hostages who are held in Gaza, along with there are 50 total. And Gaza is, on the brink of / currently experiencing widespread starvation. The people are suffering horribly. This was a confusing week for people. This is a confusing week because the administration was able to secure the release of Adon Alexander. Thank God he's home with his family. And the administration now is openly calling for an end to war, which I am very grateful that is happening. And I wonder if there is a moment in which, forgive me for my idealism here, but Democrats and Republicans can speak together in a unified voice about how absolutely essential it is that all of the hostages are returned home, that this horrible war ends, that there's immediate humanitarian aid and relief for the people of Gaza, and that all the parties are pressured to come to the table and actually build a real, just peace and a thriving future for all of the people of that region. Is there a possibility that such a thing could transpire?
Well, first I'm going to say, amen, Queen, for saying all of that. And then I'm going to say, I hope so. But this is also an administration that is, looking to make a deal with Iran. This is also an administration that is really transactional, and he's been shopping for personal deals in the Middle East. And we know that the Middle East and many of those Arab countries are complicated actors, in the road to peace in the Middle East. Lifting sanctions from Syria seemed to be okay with that Gaza Riviera trailer that was running, so and this is an administration that has documented Holocaust revisionists, white supremacists, anti-Semitic people in the administration, in Homeland Security, advising the White House through NSC, and on foreign affairs. So I don't know. We also have, a Republican conference that can't even seem to get it together when it comes to fighting against anti-Semitism, because there are folks on the hard right side of the Republican conference that still think it's okay to say some very anti-Semitic things and to protect that kind of language. Marjorie Taylor Greene says a whole bunch of things. And so what was purported to possibly be a bipartisan bill about anti-Semitism has been weaponized. So I think, saying all of that, once again, it is so important to create community. And we all have to lean back into our teachings, lean back into our traditions. On the way over here, I was thinking about, Exodus and the destruction of the Second Temple and teachings during Passover and World War II. And they are also stories of resilience and hope and fighting through the darkest of days and remembering community. And they are stories of people who do not look like one another, protecting each other and covering so that people can be safe. And we have got to find a way to translate those things into strategies of 2025 so that we can all be safe.
Yes. Amen. Amen.
I'm sorry.
No, you are not. Do not be sorry. I mean, I reread before Shabbat the speech that Rabbi Joachim Prince gave at the March on Washington in 1963. He spoke just before Dr. King, and he got up there and he said, the reason that I stand today for the Black community in this country is not out of some, he said, it's not out of some idealistic sense of connection to the community. It is out of a solidarity born of a shared experience that our history has taught us that we must respond to injustice in a particular way and that we must all be in this fight together. And he also said that serving as a rabbi in Berlin during the Hitler regime, that the worst thing that happened was not actually the hate, it was the silence of decent people in the face of it. And so I hear you, and now you all know why I feel just so blessed and so much love toward our congressperson. Thank you for sharing your heart with us again and again. I'm going to open in a moment for questions, and but first I want to say that today I was speaking a little bit about what it means. This has been a running theme for the last couple of months, but what it means to be in the midst of a storm and to simultaneously work to push back the worst effects of the storm, but also to save and preserve and to protect what's most vulnerable in the storm. And so that's sort of like, that's one of the many metaphors that we've been using in our community over these months, and how in some ways, some of the most important work that we can do in our time is reaffirm what our core values are precisely at the moment that those values are being attacked, not only because we refuse to capitulate to what the norms are in this time, but because those values are right and they matter, and the values of love and dignity and building a just and fair and equitable reality. That's actually the right side of history. And so the harder it gets to say that, the louder we have to say it, yes. Right? And so what I want to do, and I'm thinking about Gabriel Menashe here for a moment, who's about to graduate from high school, like beloved and very brilliant member of the community, and also deeply involved in politics. And I want to think about, for young people, for our like 18-year-olds, for the people who are just starting to enter this chapter of the rest of their lives, will get to vote in the if there are coming elections, they'll be voting in them.
Right.
That was for you,
after
Gabriel.
The military parade.
But I want to ask you, like, even as we face the storm that is battering against the walls of our tiny little houseboat here, what do you see as the most precious resources that we have that we need to protect? Because one day these will be the very heart of the dream of the new America once we're able to manifest that dream, which clearly isn't happening in the next couple months. But hopefully, if we look at the world 10, 20, 30 years from now, we will see a very different reality, and it won't be because we gave up on our dreams now. So I wonder if you can just help us see what motivates you. What's the dream that is the big picture driving force for you, so that you can inspire Gabriel and all of the rest of us as we try to navigate through this time, daring to imagine what a future could look like?
Well, another big question. These are very dark times, yes, but I do tell you, when I close my eyes, I do see the light. It is small. It's not big like a rainbow or a spotlight, but I see it. And so it's like you just have to keep walking towards it. The wonderful thing about little people, young people, is they're so full of hope and adventure and freedom. They are unafraid to do all the crazy stuff. And then as they grow up, we sort of, define things for them, and then we all get a little more hesitant to be free. We have to protect that, because right now we are being asked to give up our freedom. And there are a lot of people who are complicit in that. And we have to make sure that these young people know, A, that bullying is not right, and B, for our side, right, for the bright side, to continue to inspire them to grab on and hold and embrace and protect their freedom and idealism and hopefulness. We need that, because it's those kinds of ideals that allow folks to try to come up with cures for cancer or Alzheimer's, right? That allow folks to do the work that, will get them a Peace Prize, to become a principal, right? To become a social worker, to save someone's life, to become a peace negotiator, right? To become a mother. So we have to protect that. And it's up to us to figure out the things, the tools and strategies that we have in our toolbox, and lean into those. It is important to laugh. It is important to practice self-care. It is important to do the small things that bring you hope and fortify you. And sometimes when you're stressed out, you stop doing those things. And then that constricts the body, and then all kinds of bad things happen. So, I laugh a lot. I find ways to laugh, because it's the thing it's my energy. And we have to show young people, even though it might be difficult, it is not impossible. And in fact, it is our obligation, because we're all going to be leaning on each other as we move through these 3 years. And we know that they've been indoctrinating our young people with bad juju. And so we have to be looking a generation ahead to have the antidote, okay, into the next generation, okay? So we have to be a little more long-term strategy thinking.
Yes, yeah. I read Barbara Kingsolver's commencement address from 1994 yesterday, and she said, I went down some rabbit holes this week. Anyway, she said to the graduates, I want you to think 70 years in the future. Mm-hmm. Like, what do you want it to look like? It reminded me of Ari Wallach's work about, like, what kind of ancestor do you want to be and what are you doing right now in the service of that vision?
Yes.
So thank you so much. So, so I would love to take, okay, how much time do we actually have? Oh my goodness. How much time do we have? Because 2 questions. Oh, okay. 2
and then I'll answer quick. If I do my job and you do, then okay, maybe.
Brooke has, yes.
But
Brooke has a mic. So what I'm gonna say this in a less nice way, which is a question is one sentence that ends with a question mark. So because we have so many people who want to ask, so please be cognizant of that.
Thank you so much for being here.
And please introduce yourself.
I'm Adam Weissman.
Hi, Adam.
Hi. Okay, so I'm going to be brief. We know that in 2028, whoever's on the ballot, the Republicans are going to try to steal it if they don't win it at the ballot box. They're going to submit fake slates of electors. They did it last time. We have every reason to believe they're going to do it again. What's the plan?
The plan is to win. The plan is to win. Get people registered, start talking to folks, building out your community, tell people to be focused on the main thing.
Yeah, we have a 100% voting commitment in this community, thanks to Adam Weissman and other Minyan Tzedek leaders who are in this room, and we're serious about it. We mean it.
Quickest question. Who
are you?
I'm Hannah. I'm
Hi,
Susan
Hannah.
Brooks' daughter.
Hi, Hannah.
I had a question about what should students plan for student loans, because I'm scared that my loan is just going to go crazy.
Well, maybe don't listen to me because I was the one who would send in my bill for the phone company, and then I would put I'm not paying the tax because the tax is going to fund war. So you could practice that kind of resistance. You probably should plan to pay, but we are going to be, when we have filed amicus briefs, we are doing lawsuits, we're fighting against all the stuff. So I would hold off for a minute before you start paying and make them come to you. That's Sydney, not the Congresswoman.
I'm Brent Blair. I teach at USC, and USC has frozen faculty and staff salaries for a year and no more hires because of the threat that Trump will cut $1.2 billion from our budget, not because he has. How can universities be protected for free speech and for an environment that's cutting everything DEI? We have to wipe all of it out. How can we be protected?
Great question. I don't know. I know that Harvard, yay, said, screw you. And there's this interesting article about how they're coming after a lot of folks, but they didn't come after Dartmouth. Okay, whatever. That's a rabbit hole. But I do think it's important that schools, faculty members should be reaching out and building some kind of collective. There's strength in numbers and power. And the reality is that there are a lot of folks that are alumni or donors. Institutions do have connections to even some of these crazies. But fortifying through collectives is really important to do. And also reminding folks that being complicit has not worked out. Look at Columbia. That did not go well for them. So stand up and fight, yo. Stand up and fight.
I'm going to just add, as we're going to Donald for a moment, I mean, we've spent a lot of time in our community talking about how our pain as Jewish people is being exploited as an opportunity to attack higher education. And so I really do appreciate your position here. And it's like an additional heartache to know that the reason that these universities are being pushed into this corner, they're ostensibly saying that it's to protect us, when I think we know and agree that this has nothing to do with keeping Jews safer.
Not in my name.
Real quick, first of all, we wish you represented us back in Florida. We need you desperately. This is not a question.
Who are you? What's your name?
Oh, I'm sorry. My name's Don Goodstein.
Don.
This is not a question about Marjorie Taylor Greene or her constituents. My friend in Atlanta said, if you want to know about her constituents, just think of the cast of the movie Deliverance. So that was all I needed to hear. But my question is, they seem to be so unempathetic on the Republican side. And yet you quoted so many statistics about the public that's opposed to so many of these cuts. When are they going to put together the concept, or will they, that these things that they're promoting, since the vast majority doesn't want them,
Yes.
they may not get reelected? I
Yeah.
don't understand that disconnect.
So Marjorie Taylor Greene is probably going to get reelected because she has a crazy base that actually likes when she says the things she says. So we're going to write off people like her. We should anyway, just for our mental health. The other reality is that we should be focusing on all of the frontline, vulnerable Republicans who won in very tight districts or in D districts, okay? Because we have to pressure and shame them. And what happens is we tend to talk about the Democrats. What are the Democrats not doing? Blah, blah, blah. Well, yeah, we're doing a lot, but focus on these guys who are getting a pass. And talk about how they've capitulated. Talk about how they started out moderate and normal and maybe a conservative Republican and then went right to the dark side. And why is that? Expose the duplicity. And we tend to write off Republicans because we say, I can't connect, I can't even get to them. Focus on these guys because they're actually very scared. And they are reading the polls and they are hearing from their constituents. A lot of the grants that were cut going to universities were in those red districts. A lot of the infrastructure projects getting cut in those districts. And they're quietly calling the administration and saying, can you walk some of this back? So like expose that because you don't want representatives representing you who are not representing you.
Hello, my name is Luna.
Luna.
I'm an anthropologist.
So you have all the answers.
Autistic trans woman, and I'm on Social Security, Medicaid, food stamps, so this is my background. I think that people are not willing to acknowledge what the reality of this situation is. I mean, these people are Nazis. These people are fascists, and the ugly reality is that our democracy is dead. The rule of law is dead, and we are dealing with a dictator that is not going to play by the rules. And I see the Democratic Party acting, the leadership, not people like you, Representative, you're wonderful. I see the leadership acting akin to Vichy France and basically saying to Nazis, well, we need to compromise. So how can we get people to organize their communities and come to the realization that we need extra parliamentary self-defense and organizing? Thank you for your time.
Right. Well, thank you for sharing your story and all that you represent. I realize that I am fighting for all of you, and I love that. I love that. I will be sharing your story. It's also important that we recognize that not every district looks like ours. You know, we've got some folks in very red districts and purple districts, and I oftentimes don't like hearing what the moderates in my party say, but I have to hope and believe that they are speaking to the constituents that are in their district, and they have different challenges than I do, than we do in ours. So I give people grace to do what they need to do to win their districts, because at the end of the day, this is about math. And if you're not in the majority, you don't have a lot of power. We have to lean into the power that we do have, which is community. We have the courts, we have Congress, we have community. And each entity plays a different role in this fight. And so community is very important. You are the messengers. You are the truth tellers. You are the sharers of all of the stories of your neighbors, your friends, your allies, even your enemies. But it all makes a difference in telling the stories that we need the rest of America to hear, because someone you least expect will hear that story you're telling and will tap into that reality and will join the fight on the right side. So it's intoxicating to want to try to fight about what's going on inside the party, and we've got a lot of challenges. It is true, but I'm trying to conserve my energy to fight against the Jim Jordans and the James Comers and the Mike Johnsons and the Pete Moroccos and the Marco Rubios, rather than folks in my own party right now, because that's what I have to do.
Okay,
Doesn't mean you don't hold people accountable, though. That's not what I'm saying.
So it's now 2:00, so we're going to close. I'm sorry, I know that there are a few people who still have questions. This is an ongoing conversation. We're so grateful that we get to be in with you, and I hope that you'll come back soon. I want to say just a couple of things before folks go. First, as always, a huge thank you to Brooke and to our Minyan Tzedek leadership for putting together. We've been doing this for like a decade, where we've been bringing our elected officials here to talk, and it's really wonderful to connect with you. But I really want to close by blessing you. And so I had the great privilege of blessing Representative Kamlager-Dove at her inauguration, and I used the narrative of Bruria from the Talmud, who was one of the wisest, most brilliant, most thoughtful people of her time. But because she was a woman, there was really no place for her in the Beit Midrash. And the Jewish people, I think, suffered as a result of that. And so we shared some Bruria stories that I thought had interesting parallels to your life. And I really want to thank God for creating you in a moment in which you can be in this position of power, whether it's state legislature or Congress now, and who knows what your political future will hold. We can only dream and imagine. And I am so grateful that you're alive in a time where you are able to be the representative of the hopes and dreams of the people. And I really ask God to protect you, to strengthen you, to keep your heart hopeful, to keep you honest like you are. You are a truth teller in our time. And I love the way that you're walking through this very difficult period. It's giving us great strength. So we really thank you and bless you and hope that you will come back soon. And thank you to everybody for being with us this afternoon. Wishing you all Shabbat Shalom.